Well, hey, thanks so much for joining us for another week of Beyond the Weekend. We're really excited that you're here and tuning in with us, whatever church you are from, whether it's Frontline Church in Grand Rapids, New Life Church down in Wayland, Center Church in Byron Center, or Story Church in Comstock Park, or none of them. Maybe you're just tuning in or you're scrolling through and you saw the feed and you were interested. So we just want to say welcome. My name is David. I'm on staff at Frontline and as well as the Zero Collective. And what we've been doing is we've been doing a weekly series on Wednesday nights at 8 o'clock. Just to unpack Sunday's sermon just a little bit deeper than what we could normally. So we're in a series right now called Jesus People, tracking through the 7 different letters written to the churches in the book of Revelation, chapter 2. So it's been a great series. It's been awesome. Each week getting a different voice and a different perspective. And this week we're talking about Thyatira. So our guest that's joining us right now is Steve Anderson. So Steve, welcome. Really good to have you and grateful for you.
Great to be here. Sure.
Yeah, we're going to have a lot of fun. And then Kyle Contrich over at Story Church, he's the lead pastor there. So we're just going to jump in. We're going to have a lot of fun. Something you'd probably want to know about Steve. Steve is actually one of the co-owners of a business here in Grand Rapids called Federated Logistics. So I'm sure we'll hear just a little bit more about that and what he does. But we're just going to have a lot of fun together. We're going to unpack a little bit and just kind of like we were talking about right before we started. We all have a feeling this is going to go quick. So we hope you enjoy it. And Kyle, take it away.
Absolutely. Well, like David said, welcome, Steve. Steve and I go back a few years. And so, Steve, if you could just briefly even just kind of share very, very quickly, you're a co-owner of a business. So as part of that, we've been digging into this church in Thyatira. And one of the biggest things was some of the trade guilds and the businesses that were there, and they dealt with that. And so as you're in the business world, what are some of the things that maybe you've had a situation or a moment where you felt like you almost had the option to compromise your Christian beliefs and what you know to be true and how to live, and also make a decision to further your business maybe? So how does that play out for you in the business world? And maybe where do you see that play even in today's business culture, so to say?
Yeah, for sure. So one thing I want to make sure, I'm actually not in Grand Rapids anymore. I'm actually in Detroit. We have an office in Detroit and Grand Rapids and Chicago and Toronto. But I do still have the office in Grand Rapids. And what's fascinating with me, Kyle, with that question that you asked, this industry, trucking industry, is what we do. It can be a really cutthroat, nasty industry for sure. About 15 years ago, back when the economy was really taking a turn, especially in 2007, 2008, 2009, it got really, really aggressive with kind of price gouging, but also just doing favors for customers in order to get business, if you know what I mean. You know, some stuff like that, man. It just got really, really nasty. And it's always been a tough industry, very competitive industry for sure. One thing here's what I love about my partners. Right now there's 3 of us. There were 4 of us. We'll go into that later. But one thing I love about my 2 partners, we just won't. We won't compromise. And what's fascinating, I would say my partners, I don't know that I would call them Christ followers, but I trust them more than I trust a lot of people because we just won't compromise. We won't take the shortcut because we do know that it plays out in the end. That the math always stacks for us when we do things the correct, legal, honest, and the way of integrity. We don't do things like most trucking companies. We do things really weird, and that we do everything above board. And that's been tested for sure this year. That's been tested in 2008. It was tested for sure, but we just won't do it. And we've been blessed because of it for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, that's, I'm sure, in the trucking industry, I'm sure that's difficult and even frustrating at times. And so one of the other things that I want to, maybe even ask is, as someone like in knowing you, Steve, pretty well, as someone who's done, fairly well and Federated Logistics has done good in the marketplace and continues to strive and grow in that. What are some of the biggest idols that maybe you've noticed in the marketplace, in the business sector? What are some of the idols or even the worship, so to say, that people would go to in that?
Yeah, I mean, there's no doubt in the world, man. The two reasons I even got involved in this business, number one, I wanted to make a ton of money, man. I'm not even gonna lie. I'm not. And by the way, I still want to make a ton of money. It's changed for me since then. I don't read anywhere in scriptures where it says you ain't allowed to make a lot of money, man. But my heart has changed with that for sure. And that is an idol. There's no doubt. You can cheat. You can, maybe kind of put people in compromising positions to get more money, but it's going to come back to you. And the other idol that can really happen, and this is where I struggle the most, for me, is flexibility. I was kind of teasing, or we kind of joked before we came on here about my title. I actually have a title, but I really don't do it a whole lot. I'm actually one of the vice presidents of operations here, which means I run the whole operation. I actually don't. I run a person that actually runs the whole operation. So I'm really, really getting to have that Michael Scott job where I really don't know what the heck's always going on in my company until it's bad, right? If it's good, I really don't really know all the details. And so that flexibility can become an idol because I don't have to be here so much anymore. And that freedom can become an idol. And I really have to guard against that one, definitely.
Steve, let me jump in here just because I don't know your story too well either. When you talk about there was a heart change that took place when you first jumped in, you first got into business, you first started this business to now, what kind of led into that heart change, or explain some of the before and after and that in between piece?
Yeah, one of my favorite books of the Bible is Ruth, a little 4-chapter story in the Old Testament. And a term used over and over and over and over is it just so happened, right? And we know that it just so happened what that actually is, right? God was moving and shaking, right? And so my story is it just so happened as I was kind of starting Federated and actually talking about actually leaving my old job. I also started working and started attending Kenwood Community Church and got involved in youth ministry. I mean, this all happened within a year or two of each other. And I met with the high school pastor there, Jeff Eckert, and we talked through, what my business looked like. And really, in those days, I was about making the money and retiring as early as I could with as much money as possible. I mean, that was the goal. I wasn't mean and nasty about it. I just wanted, to fill the pocketbook. And what changed was God put in my heart for ministry. That's what changed my heart to where, yes, this job, this company can still fund me, can still fund my household, not so that I can retire quicker, but so that I can spend more time with students, with athletes now, doing ministry. It's definitely become a tent-making thing for me. And that's been the biggest change. Was it used to fund my household, now it funds really my ministerial process, definitely.
Sounds Andy Stanley is a pastor down in Atlanta. He's somebody that I occasionally watch now and then. And he said this statement once when he was talking about purpose. And he said, the key to discovering your purpose is realizing that you can't be the means and the end. And if I'm hearing you right, so tell me if I'm wrong, but if I'm hearing you right, what you were saying is your job before, your income before, starting this business before, it had you as the means. So you were the one doing it, you were the one working, and then also you as the end, but you lacked like that kingdom purpose. And so that heart change that took place was, this was no longer about you. This was actually about people, and specifically for your case, students and younger individuals who didn't have a relationship with Jesus, so that it could free you up to actually walk with them and make an eternal impact. Is that kind of what you're saying?
100%. Yeah, no doubt. That's awesome. It was a scary shift for sure, but it was God ordained, man, and there's no question of it. No question of it.
That's awesome.
It reminds me of, like I said, I've known Steve for years, and I was one of those students that had the opportunity to kind of learn under Steve in some ways. And one of the things that Steve every year, and I don't forget it, is the 4 M's. And I'm sure you remember those teaching series of the money, master, mission, and your mate. And so we would go through those. And one of the things that Steve, you always talked about in those 4 M's was you really hit on a lot of times the money part of it. You just understand the business world. You understand the money, so to say, sector and all that. And I think one of the things that was so clear to me in learning and now as an adult with, 2 young boys and a wife and a family and figuring out how to do this thing called adulting, I've had to learn what that looks like and mean, right? And I think one of the biggest questions for a lot of us maybe even is, how do you stay grounded? So how do you stay grounded even in the midst of, great years where your business is taking off and reaching new heights and breaking records for your, previous years and everything? How do you stay grounded in what Jesus has laid out for you and called you to do, and also stay grounded in what he has blessed you in and not abuse that, so to say, if you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Well, I spend a lot of times, and I am not a nerd by any means. I'm not a numbers guy. I am not that guy. But I spend a lot of time printing and looking at financial reports, not to analyze them, not to see where I can make cuts, not to see anything, just to sit there and look at these financial reports and saying, oh my goodness, he did it again. He did it again. And I can't believe how he is blessing us. And I'm not saying finances are the be-all, end-all blessing. He did it again in that we can pair health insurance, which I know so many struggle with. He did it again where I know we have about 150 employees here at Federated Logistics, and we have never laid anyone off until March of 2020. That is something that we're very, very proud of. We've never had to lay someone off until this pandemic hit. And we know the blessings, including in 2008. In 2008, as so many companies were going out of business in our industry, we actually grew 40% in 2008, unheard of in our industry. And the hard thing to do is stay grounded, because yes, we can say, man, it's because we're awesome. It's because we get the thing done and we make sure we do the loads the way we're supposed to do them. We pump this stuff out. But again, I love my partners, and we understand that sometimes it is being in the right place at the right time. I have about 428 stories of that. But again, it didn't just so happen that we connected with somebody who needed a company to move their freight. It just so happened. We saw those. It just so happened so many times. And I know it's God's blessing. Again, not to bless us financially, not to give us this so much that we can't, but we actually give, to make sure that we give it away, make sure that we do what's right with our time. Every year I do a contract prayer with God at the start of the year, and I cut him a deal, like he listens to my demands, right? But he seems to have every year, even in 2020. What I prayed for in January didn't really happen in 2020, but he still kept his end of the deal for sure. And to stay grounded, it can be hard, man. It can definitely be hard to stay grounded. But a few years ago, I'm now forced to be grounded with it, because it's kind of something that happened in our company, which we can go over more here if you want.
Yeah, I mean, if you would maybe even elaborate a little bit on that, because I think that might even talk into a little bit of some of the struggles that maybe we as a world have even seen in the possibility of serving other idols or other gods besides God himself.
Yeah. So so we started my end of the company. We actually, in our company, there's about 4 different companies of different kind of transportation. And the one that I started was in 2000. And around 2007, we brought in a new sales guy, and he did really well. He did really well. And it got really easy, and we were making a ton of money. And this is when I was doing ministry too, but I had no financial worries. Not only did I not have financial worries, but we were able to do a lot of cool things with our finances. And it got really, really easy. And now looking back, did it get too easy? Because in 2000, at the end of 2017, he decided to leave and take his customers with him. Well, when your sales guy leaves, that takes a lot of sales with him. And 18 and 19, I was forced to really, really rely on God, because I'm not in a growth mode right now. I'm too old to grow more of the business. I don't want to grow it anymore. So I was wanting to hang on to what we had. I had to really rely on the Lord to make that bottom number not in parentheses. Before that was not a worry for a long time. That number was not in parentheses, which is a loss. And the last 2 years, it's been right on break even. You want to talk about daily manna, man. We've had daily manna the last 3 years. And it's actually fun seeing that daily manna because it reminds me, I have like 17 of these rocks in my life here. It's the same passage from 1 Samuel 7:12. And I just want to read it. Actually, one of my mentors, Jerry Breckheisen, up there in Grand Rapids, he did a devotional with us when I was at NTS. And he talked about this passage. It just hit me so hard. And it says, then Samuel took a stone and set it up between Mizpah and Shen. He named it Ebenezer, saying, thus far, the Lord has helped us. Thus far. And I have to look at this stuff and remind myself all the time, God brought us to here. He brought me here. I'm alive. I'm breathing. I got the roof. I'm well fed, obviously, right? I'm okay up to this point. And I'm sure tomorrow I'm going to be able to say the same thing. And these stones, one in here in my office, one in my van, one in my house, one in my other office, one in my office in Grand Rapids, I have a rock with this verse on it just to remind me all the time, because I don't get it all the time. And I need this to remind me, God has brought me here so far. It'll happen again tomorrow. And I can say it again. And that's really what's kept me grounded in this really, really hard time.
And well, I appreciate you sharing that, Steve. And, you know, as you continue to navigate, you know, not only business, but even coming out of 2020 and into 2021, I'm sure there's moments where those stones are going to be very meaningful and very impactful. One of the personal things I love, Steve, is every year, right around the new year, you share a picture every year. And I know many people, if they're not friends with you on Facebook or Instagram or social media, they may not see the picture or even know. But one of the biggest things for me is this picture just is it's basically a picture of all zeros, kind of in a report. Yeah. And I love looking forward to it every year. I love looking at it every year. It's a reminder for me of, you know, what God is doing and will do. And I would just love it if you would even just share a little bit about what that means for you and how you got to that place where you decided that that's what you're going to do and you're going to walk in that, you know, continually each year.
Well, I'm not a big report nerd, but one day I decided to pull you know, at the end of every year, I have to do a big year-end report, and then I have to delete a whole year of financials to start the new year. And one year I just thought it'd be funny. I'm like, all right, let me pull a 2-year report on January 1st, showing what happened last year and showing what's happening this year, which is, of course, going to be zeros. And as I read that, I saw them by each other. I saw all these numbers and all these zeros. And for some reason, it just hit me. Like, January 1st, it's always all zeros. And there's anticipation, and there's hope, there's, you know, budgets, there's all these things to make these numbers happen, and a lot of work to make these things happen. And it just hit me that one year, I think it was maybe 2010, that I did that for the first time, totally on accident. And I was just so thankful for those numbers. Not that they represented dollars, but that they represented, again, blessing of what God allows me to do in ministry. I get to do some of the coolest stuff in the world in ministry. No doubt. I don't care if you're a lead pastor, my gig is way cooler than yours. I don't care if you're a teaching pastor, my gig is way cooler than yours too. I get to sit with now college athletes at the University of Michigan and talk about Jesus with them, about, you know, doing Bible study with them. And I'm, man, and I can only do that because of those numbers that God helps me get into my financial statement, into my income statement. So every January 1st, when I do that report, I print a January 1st income statement, and of course it's all zeros. And I do pray thankfulness over the last year, and I pre-thank him for what's going to happen this year. And this year was a tough one to do, obviously, no doubt. January 1st, 2021. I thought it was going to be tough until I started doing them, and thanked him for 2020. Yes, there was a big parenthesis at the bottom for the first time in a long time at that bottom line. And it was a big number parenthesis. We lost a lot of money in 2020. But I'm in my office right now. You see the lights are on, the fan is on, the printer's working, everything's still working here, even with that parenthesis. And so to thank God, even when it wasn't enough, means we had enough. And to pre-thank him for 2021, man, it's just, that's one of those things that you said, Kyle, that asked me about what grounds me is remembering. I always start with zeros, and somehow numbers get plugged in there. And it definitely isn't me. I'm not a sales guy. I just put the numbers in there, and just so thankful for that.
Steve, I'm grateful that you shared even a little bit about 2020 and what that was like. I mean, I heard you say two things. One was until March 2020, you had never laid anybody off. And then what you just said too is there was a giant parentheses, and it sounds like that was the first year that you guys had lost money. Is that correct?
Yeah.
So obviously we're so sorry for that, and obviously we only want the best for you, just like everybody else watching this. But there's a piece of that. There was a question that was just tugging in my heart since you started, and my question was going to be: is God still good if things don't go well, if things don't work, if the number at the bottom is not black, it's red? Is God still good? Because as we talk about Revelation, and particularly Revelation chapter 2, what Jesus holds against the church in Thyatira is that they were like, they committed adultery, basically, but against Jesus. Instead of finding their hope and reliance and security in him, they found it in other places. And so Jesus gives that a name. He calls it Jezebel, which obviously we talked a little bit on Sunday. But I think for so many people watching this, Jezebel could be the black number at the bottom of their year-end spreadsheet. Yeah. For so many people, Jezebel could be your job security. It could be your health insurance. It could be the house you live in, the car you drive, the electricity we have. I mean, there's so many things that actually lure and attract our hearts. And I think, honestly, I love everything you've shared. I think the most impactful thing to me that you have shared, though, is that you are so grateful to who God is and how he's provided for you, even when things turned horrible. That didn't, because I think for the rest of us watching, it doesn't seem like they are, based on how you're reacting or how you're talking about it. So maybe the question I would just toss your way, or maybe just give you an opportunity. What would you say to people right now who are struggling, who have lost a lot, who have received a horrible diagnosis, who maybe question the goodness of God and are tempted to, instead of running to him, running to all these other things that maybe could provide or fill these needs? What would you say to that person right now?
Yeah. You know, I just have to go back to my rocks. My 1 Samuel 7:12 rock, and just remember that God got me here. He got me here today. And there's no doubt he's working something. No matter how bad it's going right now, he's working something. If we think about, again, the story of Ruth, and all that time that Ruth was still in Moab, man, things were shaking back in Bethlehem before they got back. Right, God was already shifting pieces in order for when they returned. Her Naomi got back there. He's always working something. We just don't know what it is all the time. I see God's math in the midst of this stuff does not make sense. But at the end, and you look back, it reconciles to zero every stinking time. Every time it reconciles, it balances to zero like it's supposed to. And there's some crazy math, no doubt. But for some reason, every time it's in God's hands and we allow God to move, it reconciles, man. He redeems everything. He redeems it all. No
I think
doubt.
there's a great word there. There's a great illustration in your zeros that you do too, because it's what you're saying is, hey, it's a clean slate looking forward. But I think to add a theological spin on that, what we bring to the equation is zero.
Yeah.
We bring nothing. We can't control it. We can't dictate it. I mean, it's totally reliant on him. And so what you're doing is you're showing up empty, saying, okay, I'm not going to run to my finances. I'm not going to run to my healthcare. I'm not going to run to X, Y, Z, fill in the blank, wherever we find security, hope, peace, whatever. You're saying, I'm at zero. Jesus is going to fill me, and Jesus knows what I need, and I trust him. Is that's what you're saying?
No doubt. Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, thanks, Steve.
I think one of the things that you kind of touched on, and one of the biggest words that I think we've even talked about and preached about these past few weeks is even just God's faithfulness, not only to his church, but to his people. And when we remember what he has done, when we remember who he is, and we remember and know what he will do, it's the moment of faithfulness, right? And so, I think you talked a little bit about it. If you could maybe give one encouragement to maybe the people right now of how do you remember God's faithfulness even in the midst of all this? Excuse me, in the midst of everything that's gone on. How have you done that? And what would you encourage them to look for and find in faithfulness in that?
Yeah. I mean, there's a term we use in sports, and we use it often, and it's called trust the process, right? It's called trust the process of making sure you're working out, making sure you're eating right, making sure you're doing your drills and you're going to practice, you're watching game film, all those things. You trust the process. We see in the NFL 16 days of a 365-day process, and we just see 16 days of that. In college, it's only 12. Unfortunately, 6 for Michigan this year, but we only saw 6 days of it this year. But it was still a hard process, and we ask our athletes to trust that process, knowing that your return on investment will be huge when you put in the work, right? And our work, yes, we do have some stuff to do in our walk, right? But it is trusting, and more than anything, man, it's being obedient, man. That's one thing I have learned. It's more than sacrifice. It's being obedient and trusting that process. That, oh, by the way, it still might not be the way we wanted to turn it out. Oh, by the way, we still may have a big parenthesis under our income statement. Oh, by the way, I don't get the job, on and on it goes. But to trust the process and be obedient to God's call, even when it doesn't make sense, it will reconcile and redeem later. It's a hard one to do. I'd love to say, rainbows and fruity puffs at the end, man, but it never seems to be that way. It always seems to be a struggle. I think it's because we make it a struggle sometimes. But man, when we do just really rely and have that kingdom mindset, for one, we're not going to be here forever. I mean, this is not our home. This is not our home. We are living for something way bigger than the earth. And we trust that process, and we will get there. We'll get there.
Well, Steve, thanks for just taking the time to share with us, especially just the perspective of someone who is in an industry like yours. I mean, you're in the business world, you're in the numbers world. I mean, you think in ways that there's a lot of other people who are watching this that don't. But in the same vein, there's a lot of people watching this that do think just like you, that understand the weight and the pressure of financial statements and year-end balances and income and expenses, et cetera. What I'm grateful for is just that you opened up and you let us in on what the last year especially has been like for you from a faith standpoint, and how your faith has really kind of intertwined with the business world this last year. So just on behalf of everybody, thank you. Thank you for spending the time with us. We're going to go ahead and wrap up our time together. But Steve, I'd love to just toss it your way and just ask you if you would pray for us, for everybody watching this right now that's participating, and especially those who've had a year in 2020 like you did. Maybe a year of struggle, a year of bad diagnosis, a year of pain, a year of loss, a year of unemployment, whatever that might be. Would you pray for that person especially, and just pray that they would remain faithful to our Savior, just like we've talked about the last half hour?
Sure, for sure.
Awesome.
Father God, we come to you this morning, this evening, wherever we are. either live or watching on a screen somewhere. And we are so thankful for that faithfulness that we don't always feel, that faithfulness that we don't always see or get. But we know that you're faithful. We know that you're faithful because we're breathing. We know that you're faithful because we're fed. And like we were talking about today, we know that some people have had a hard year, physically, emotionally, job market wise, family, politically, all these things, God, man, it's exploding right now. And none of this surprised you. That's what it actually cracks me up sometimes when I think about how we just get so turned around by things, and you knew this was coming. But Father, the thing is, man, people are hurting right now. There's been emotional wounds. There's been mental hurts. Physically, for sure, people are hurting. And even spiritually, people are asking, how can a God that loves me allow this? How can a God that says that he cares do that? And Father, I do pray for those people. I pray against anything the enemy's trying to do here, God, to divide us from you. I do pray for the people that are still out of jobs, for the people that are still sick from this virus or any other sicknesses, God, that people that are hurting financially big time right now. And I do pray for them, realizing that, yes, grief and pain, it does come right now, God, but Scripture says joy comes in the morning. We need that morning, and we want that morning to come here soon, God. Thankful and thank you for your love, for your faithfulness, and for the hope that you give us, that our hope is not in this world, but our hope is with you eternally. And that's where our joy comes. That's from where our strength comes. And that's what we want to be driving towards, God, is being with you for eternity. We do thank you and love you. And we do want to give you all glory, honor, and praise. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Well, thank you, Steve. Thank you very much for praying for all of us, for sharing just a little bit of your life with us. Kyle, thank you for joining and jumping on. It was great doing this together. And thank you to all of you who are just watching and tuning in, maybe not even just this week, but for the other weeks that we've already done too. So we'll be here again next week, Wednesday, 8 p.m. On Facebook Live on all the different platforms. So we hope you'll be able to join us. But for now, hope you have a great rest of your night, and we'll see you soon. See you.